Continuing the Maimer V'Krisem Lochem Arim, which is from Shabbos Parshas Matos Maseh Mevorchim HaChodesh Menachem of Tafshin Yud Beis. In the Maimer, the Rebbe talks about the idea of Arim Miklat, the cities of refuge, and how in the Medrash it says that in the beginning of time, Adam Arishain had to run away to a city of refuge, which means that Adam Arishain, through the Aveira that he did in the Chet Eitz Hadas, the sin of the tree of knowledge, as a result, he caused the concept of murder, because he caused death for all future generations. And Hashem looked at it as, instead of a intentional sin, Hashem took it as a sin which is unintentional and allowed him to be exiled, which is why Adam Arishan was chased out of Eitz Hadas, was chased out of Gan Eden. Because that's the idea of Yer Miklad, like running into a city of refuge. And in order to explain this, so the Rebbe explains the idea that whenever a person sins, whenever a person commits an Aveda, he's actually doing something which is akin to murder. Because a person has inside him two Adams, two people. There's Adam of Kedusha, there's the man of Kedusha, of holiness, which is the godly soul, and there's the Adam of Klippa, the man of Klippa, meaning the existence of Klippa, which is the animal soul. And as a result, when a person sins, it's Shoifech Dam Adam Ba'adam. He's taking away the chayas, the sustenance, the godly sustenance that's supposed to go to Kedusha, and he's giving it and he's channeling it instead to Klippa. And that's why it's called Noikev Shem Avaya. When a person sins, it's like he's making a hole in the vessel and allowing the chayas, the sustenance, to go out, to leave it, and to go instead to the wrong place. So in order to explain this idea, the Rebbe begins to explain what is the meaning of the fact that we say that when a person does something wrong, he's moisef chayas and klippas, he adds sustenance to klippas. What's klippa? We know that for us, for Jews, according to the true understanding of Yiddishkeit, there's no such a thing as duality. There's no two things. There's only one. The only existence is Hashem. Klippa is also something that was created by Hashem. Created by Hashem means that Hashem gave it the chayas, the sustenance to exist. Not only that, the constant existence of it, every moment, has to come from a sustenance that it receives from Hashem. So what does it mean when a person's doing an Aveda? We say he's adding sustenance to Klippa. How could a person add chayas to Klippa? The Klippa exists because Hashem wants it to exist. So let's first understand the general idea, what is Kedusha and what is Klippa, something which we've discussed in past lessons. But let's go through the concept again. The general idea that there is in the world is that there exists only Hashem, nothing else. That's the only true existence. And Hashem gives life to everything, and that's what everything's all about. Hashem wanted us to be in a world where there is an existence that seems to deny that. And that we should not only not allow that to affect us, but on the contrary, we should transform that existence so that the entire world should realize and recognize the truth of Hashem, and that's what's called Adira B'Tachtonim. And that's the meaning of the existence of Klippa. Klippa is a shell just like we have a shell that covers over a nut, that covers over a fruit. The shell is there covering it, not enabling the person to recognize and see the fruit that's inside it. You take off the shell, get rid of the shell, then there goes the fruit, and you have the most amazing fruit that's inside it that's hidden. And in a similar manner, Klippa is like the fruit, the shell of the fruit that covers over the truth of godliness and conceals it so that it shouldn't be revealed, it shouldn't be able to be seen and recognized by a person. However, we said that Klippa obviously has to have an existence that comes from Hashem. And so the Rebbe explains over here a very interesting thing. In truth, Klippa is, as the example and the analogy we gave of the shell of a fruit. The shell of a fruit, what's its purpose? It protects the fruit. Both while the fruit is growing, and especially while the fruit is growing. If you didn't have a shell to protect it, it would be attacked by all the other things, by all the insects, etc. And once the fruit is fully grown and taken off the tree, if it doesn't have the shell, it goes bad, it doesn't have the same freshness, etc. So the true purpose of the shell is protection for the fruit. That's the true idea of klippa. Klippa, meaning Hashem put a shell in this world, and the real existence of the shell is a protection for Kedusha. How does that work? So let's look at a person. What's the biggest claim and the biggest excuse that the Yetzer Hara finds for a person explaining to him why you shouldn't do what's right, or why even more than that he should, God forbid, do something that's wrong? The Yetzer Hara comes to the person and he says to him, who are you anyway? Who are you that you should be worthy of being able to serve Hashem? The Yetzer Hara, as we know, the famous story that we're told, that the Yetzer Hara is like a chassid wearing a zayd and a zupitza. He wears a silk kapata. He doesn't come as a bad guy. One time the Alter Rebbe said that, do you think that Esav had this had an axe and red horns? Do you think Esav looked like a shegitz? Esav had a streimel and he had a silk kapata, and he came in the disguise of someone who's a very holy person. We know that the Gemara tells us Esav would ask, how do you take meiser out of salt? Esav would come and show himself as someone who's a really holy person. And like we know that Esav, the Gemara tells us, is compared to a animal that we don't like to mention the name, that although it is totally not kosher, yet it shows its feet that it has split hooves. It shows, look, I'm kosher, look, I'm holy. And the same thing with the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara doesn't first come and start coming to a person and tell him, do an Aveda. In Ayim Yayim, we're told that the Yetzer Hara sometimes comes and tells a person to do something right, but when it's the wrong time. And in the same manner, when the Yetzer Hara comes to a person, he comes with all kinds of excuses. The Yetzer Hara learned Chassidus as well. There's a famous story of Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev one time came to the Amud for Kol Nidre. And he takes the talis, and he's wearing his talis, and he's sitting there by the Amud, and he's thinking, people are waiting, when he can start Kol Nidre. And they see that he's having an argument. He's arguing back and forth, and finally he takes the talis off and he says, so if you're the chassid, you're the lamdan, why don't you say Kol Nidre? What happened? So Rabbi Yitzchak later explained, he says, I was about to start saying Kol Nidre, and the Yetzer Hara came to me, and he says, you're coming to say Kol Nidre? Who are you to come and say Kol Nidre? So I said to him, what do you mean? I'm a chassid. I did so many mitzvahs. I did so many good things. So Yetzer Hara said to me, I was right there with you. I did them together with you. I said, I learned so much Torah. He said, I learned the Torah with you. So he says, I said to him, but I was by the Maggid. So he says, I was right there with you by the Maggid. So I said to him, if you're the chassid, you're the lamdan, you were by the Maggid, why don't you say Kol Nidre? The Yetzer Hara was with us, he's there together with us, he knows all the ideas of Chassidus that we learn, but he uses them for his own purposes. We learn in Chassidus how everything is Hashem, and we learn the greatness of Hashem. We learn in Chassidus how important it is when a person does a mitzvah. That when a person does a mitzvah, it says, Va'ato yigdal nokoyach Hashem, it's as if by doing good things, we add strength to Hashem. And God forbid the opposite, when a person does an Aveda Tzur Yilad Chateshi, we, so to speak, weaken the great power above. And so the Yetzer Hara comes to the person and he uses that to his benefit. He says, who do you think you are, that you can get involved with such a great and important thing like Avedas Hashem? That's something which is for more important people. That's something which is for someone who's such a greater person than you. You're dealing with Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of Kings. You know your situation. You know where you're holding. You know what you've done today and yesterday and last night. How could you, who's on such a level, go and serve Hashem and do a mitzvah and give strength to Hashem? And with that, the Yetzer Hara tries to cause a person to leave and to stay away from serving Hashem and from doing the right thing, and not to be afraid of doing the wrong thing, because he says you're not able to deal with it anyway. And this is the reason why in the beginning of the Avodah, a person needs to have a little bit of yeshus. He needs to have some klippa. Klippa is the cover that says, I exist. The person in the beginning of the Avodah has to not allow the Yetzer Hara to give him this false bittul, nullification, but rather say, no, I'm someone who could serve Hashem. There's the known story of the chassid of the Alter Rebbe that said, I serve Hashem with ego. Now we know that in Chassidus the worst thing in the world is ego. So he asked him, how could you serve Hashem with ego, with pride? And so he said to them, when the Yetzer Hara comes to me and he tries to get me to do an Aveda, I say, do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? I'm a chassid. I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. I'm someone who's connected to such high places. How can I? It doesn't pass. It's not something which is befitting of someone of my standing to do something like this. And in a similar fashion, when the Yetzer Hara tries to tell the person, you're not able to serve Hashem and therefore it doesn't matter, you say, no, I'm a Jew, I have a neshama, I'm a chassid, I'm a person who's connected to Hashem, and therefore I have the ability and the power to be able to serve Hashem. And this is the reason why in the beginning of Avodah we need to have a klippa. We need to have a shell that takes us away from the complete bittul, but rather gives us a certain type of existence. However, if we'll take the example and the analogy of the fruit, the shell is only there to protect the fruit while it's growing. The shell is there to protect the fruit before it's ready to be eaten. But once a person is ready to eat the fruit, he has to take off the shell, get rid of the shell, and the shell is thrown in the garbage, and the fruit is eaten. You can't eat the shell together with the fruit. And in a similar manner, in the beginning of Avodah, a person needs to have a little bit of this yeshus, to tell himself, no, I am good, and I am important, and I have that power to serve Hashem. But later, once he gets deeper into the Avodah, then he realizes the truth, how everything is Hashem, and on the contrary, that helps him serve Hashem properly by getting rid of even of this little bit of yeshus, of this little bit of ego. Now, with regards to the shell and the fruit, so when you have a shell, the shell is not in the fruit, it's not part of the fruit, it's outside of the fruit. It's true that it's protecting the fruit, but it's outside of the fruit. And in a similar fashion, when we talk about the klippa in essence is something which is outside of Kedusha, and Kedusha doesn't have any connection whatsoever to the klippa. It's there protecting it. It's there standing, so to speak, between the person and the Yetzer Hara. But it's not part of a person's knowledge, and it's not part of where a person is involved with. And that's why it says that before Chet Eitzadas, the klippa was not even existence in this world. It was like something which was outside of the world. Because its purpose is to protect the Kedusha, to protect the fruit. But its existence isn't there in the world. Its existence is in a different world. It says that it was outside. It was like under the Olam Asiyah. That's where the place of the klippa was. Adam Arishan, through the fact that he looked into the place of the klippa, he gave it its existence, and as a result, he mixed good and bad together. And it's the same thing in the avodah of a person. That a person, even though in the beginning of his avodah, He has the idea of yeshus. There has to be some type of ego, but it has to be something that's outside of him. If he mixes it and brings it together and makes it part of him, that's the idea of giving extra chayes to klippos, which Mr. Hashem we're going to learn next time.